Hello and welcome back to the podcast. So this is our first ever double header, so to speak. So Thom not only gave a detailed breakdown and run through of machine learning on my Tuesday Greensboro College class lecture, but now he has returned for some thorough Q&A. So he kind of had to run. But Thom, thank you for coming on. And I've got two students actually. So two students from different higher education institutions. So I've got Hunter Brown, my current intern, who's at High Point University, and then Christina, who just finished up. Well, I guess it's been a few months now, but she was in my first cohort of analytics minor students, so at Greensboro College. So I'm excited about this. So how's everybody doing?
Good.
I'm doing great. I just moved into a new room, actually, believe it or not. So
Wow.
we got a new look for the for the intern over here.
Christina, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
So we actually, so for everybody listening, me and Christina just had a meeting. She is writing the blog for our learning platforms. She's gotten what, 8-10 blog posts already under your belt?
Yeah, hopefully they'll be up and running so people can go check them out soon.
Yeah. So let me intro you a little bit, Christina. So you were a math major who had a minor in business analytics, and you just got accepted into a pretty competitive program. I'll let you talk all about that, but I guess to set the stage for this conversation, last Saturday you guys had a conversation about machine learning, and that's something that you might actually want to get into. So I think you talking and interfacing with Thom would be really useful for everybody listening.
Yeah, so I applied to this really amazing program. It's called DS4A, which stands for Data Science for All, and it's taught by it's called Correlation 1. So it's kind of geared towards bridging the gap in data literacy in the minority community, because a lot of times they're not presented with the opportunity of, getting those higher level classes with data science. It can be hard to get into that field if you come from a certain background. So that's kind of what it's geared towards. And it's a 14-week program where they kind of take you through the basics of data science. And through the entire program, you're working on a capstone is what they call it, a capstone project, which you get a mentor and several TAs to help you with it. So at the end, you have this final product that you get to deliver and present. So I'm really excited. And yeah, this past week, we had our first real lecture where we had a professor from, I believe it was from Duke University, who came and talked to us about, the differences between what is data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, because a lot of times those tend to just be put into a single category, even though, there are differences among them. So yeah, that's pretty much the experience I've had so far.
Gotcha. So you have any high-level questions for Thom about machine learning?
Yeah, so one of the things that we touched on the last lecture that we did with the program, they talked about having data that is both, I think the terms they used was accurate data, but then also so they kind of describe it in a target view. So it's if the data points are hitting the main point of the target and they're all clustered together, it was the best possible scenario when it comes to machine learning. But then oftentimes they said that's not what you get. You have different data points and they seem you could learn something from them, but they're all very spread out. And it's how do you implement machine learning when that's what your data looks like. And I was kind of like lost on that when they started talking about that. So I don't know if you have an insight on that.
I think I understand what you're getting at, Christina. Were they trying to say the balance between training your model well, not overtraining it, not undertraining it, and then making sure it worked well for new data coming in? Were they talking about that?
Yeah, so that's pretty much what they were talking about.
Yeah, we call that making sure the model generalizes well. And you notice I put a lot of emphasis on talking around linear regression when I teach about ML. Why do I do that? And logistic regression for classification. It's because those two are the building blocks of a lot of other things we do. And so are decision trees, by the way. And I know there may be people out there going, but what about, yeah, there's more. But to me, those are the two basic branches. We build up decision trees into random forests and ensemble methods. We build up linear and logistic regression. And those are the building blocks for neural networks and deep learning neural networks and even transformers when you get down to it. So, but if we start at that first basic level of just using good old linear and logistic regression, the reason we love to look at those first, even if we're not going to use them as our final predictive model, is we can learn so much about our data set from them because they're steeped in statistics. And if it's any topic, Christina, that data scientists should long to get better at, in my opinion, it's first statistics. And the second one would be linear algebra. They can be very closely linked when you get into harder, more involved statistics. But the nice thing is there are tools to help you. There's a lot of features, accessories you can add on to linear regression. Like you've probably heard of Lasso. Have you heard of that yet? Okay, great. So L1 norms and ridge. And those are techniques to help you generalize through a messy data field so it doesn't tend to over or undertrain. Well, more so it doesn't overtrain. But there are the things you will really want to focus on. The other reason we focus on linear and logistic regression so much is they help us figure out how to reduce our data set to the best set of features. Very powerful that way. So as we're going through conditioning our feature set, marching toward machine learning, those techniques are super valuable to help us get down to the smallest set. And there's various ways to use them. I hope that's helping. Is that?
Yeah, I think I can like build off of the idea that where it starts with like the linear regression model, since, you know, I guess with that very simple baseline, you're learning how you can, you know, fit the data points into, like, I guess either a linear or, you know, quadratic or however high to a degree of a polynomial that you need.
So Christina, your level of math, like you got a math degree, so do you understand all these? Like it's beyond me. Like all this math stuff is like over my head. But it sounds like you're tracking with what he's saying.
Yeah, I think that's how I was originally like introduced to the idea of machine learning. It was through linear regression, because linear regression is something I was more comfortable with than the idea of like AI learning. So I think starting from there, because I think that's a more, it's like an easier concept to grasp, and then tying that to like machine learning, I think it makes it easy to like bridge the gap of like, okay, how does the data actually like lead you to learn something, I guess.
Is your dog drinking water right now? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
I was like muting different people.
Sorry,
Where's this weird sound coming from?
I have a lot of background noise too, but I want to encourage the audience with something. And Hunter, I'm gonna focus in on you a little bit. I'm guessing we were throwing around terms, and like what I do when I'm hearing you, you're like, oh, what does that mean? Oh no, now I'm losing track because I'm wondering what that means. Guys, everyone out there, think of this as a first pass. When we when Christina and I throw out lingo you're not getting, just write the word down and Google search it. I mean, really, you're just about 3 to 5 references away from having a really strong feel of, oh, that's all they're talking about when they say that term. I tell you, in my whole career, which is long now, the thing that would trip me up the quickest is new lingo, new terminology, someone using a new acronym. And I'm like, oh, I really want to track with this brilliant person, but they just threw out a term or an acronym I don't know. Just start writing down the terms and go research them later. It really helps, but it's hard to get around that. I hope though that we can. Wait, what does Thom mean when he says that term? I'm trying to speak very general, but I still speak like a geek. So sorry for that.
So I'm not as familiar, obviously, with math as either you or Christina is. But I have worked a little bit with not so much machine learning, but data science. I worked with pandas for a little bit. I've done some work with linear regression, not so much with logistic regression. But either way, I understand the concepts. So don't worry about too much about the vocabulary. I'll follow along the best I can. And if there is anything I don't know about, then chances are somebody in the audience probably doesn't know either. So it'd be a great
Well,
talking point.
Hunter, I want you to know when you said pandas, every machine lover in our audience probably just had a very warm, fuzzy feeling. We are very pandas or PySpark centric. I believe PySpark has a lot of pandas like tools embedded in it too.
Hmm.
I mean, from my experience.
Yeah.
And then, of course, now, Hunter, I'm curious, and John David, if I say Matplotlib or Seaborn, does that have any meaning to y'all?
The prior does,
Yeah.
like I vaguely recall it, maybe, but not so much the second one.
So they're not very shiny tools. Well, they can be if you tweak them enough, but there are down and dirty, quick visualization tools for plots and charts and everything. It'd be kind of like someone that's in R using R Shiny, or they're probably laughing at me because R Shiny really rocks. But um, we can actually programmatically get to visualizations of what we're doing very rapidly, writing code. It wouldn't look as beautiful as a dashboard that you guys use, uh, make using Power BI or Tableau, but it gets the job done to let us see what we're doing, what we're dealing with.
It's like the back of the napkin math.
It's very
That's
important
Yeah.
when you're going through that stuff and you're actually doing the math that you check up and see how it's looking. In my opinion, I I think that you can sometimes lose track of that when you're getting lost in the code and the numbers. And it's like, oh, is this actually saying what it should say? Let me check on that. And it sounds like you just described a really easy tool for doing that. So
uh, it's one of our staple tools for sure. And more to your point, um, and this relates back to that fire hose lecture I gave earlier this week. It's so important to recognize. I was trying to do a combination of here's the methodologies we use, but here is some recipe code that you would use to get that done, what I'm talking about. And previously, when members of my family have showed up in public to give talks around machine learning pipeline development, we haven't shown any code. And I'm trying to branch into saying, please don't get too wrapped up into the code. Here's a link to it so you can get to it later. But please just look at it kind of as a recipe that you'll be able to refer back to, and keep it very high and light with fake data. The reason I'm in love with being an expert at creating fake data is because, unlike with real world data, when you're forcing the data to look a certain way, you can push limits that don't always show up in real world data. And you also can know what your answer should turn out to be. And so it really helps accelerate the learning process. And I just wanted to highlight that if you go back and look at the notebook, play with it long enough, do some searches around what you see, you'll begin to get a level of fluency with what's going on in that notebook.
Absolutely, yeah.
Gotcha.
I John,
It looks like Christina's screen has been frozen. Oh no. Hunter, what were you saying? Didn't mean to interrupt.
well, so I worked in Jupyter Notebook when I was working. I was working with somebody who's local here in Greensboro, and it to be honest, I mean it is the syntax, simply just the syntax of it all was tricky to me. So what I am very interested in learning is um, are kind of the steps, or like what you're looking for when you are building out a machine learning tool. So like let's say you're going to be building like this is just off the top of my head, like a stock trading bot or something like that. Um, what what exactly? I mean, so I'm just trying to get a better understanding. What exactly are you looking for in something like that?
Well, there's so many moving parts when you get into something like that, Hunter. And I want to predict what I think might have been syntactically complicated for you when you were looking at that notebook. First of all, we work with things we call classes and modules. And so when we do an import and then we're instantiating a class, not a hard concept, but if you're hearing it for the first time, you're like, what are you talking about? And
Yeah.
it's kind of like saying, all right, I went to a factory and it's a bike factory. And they have all these different types of wheels and bike frames and brakes and suspension systems and seats and handlebars. They're all bikes. But when we instantiate a class, it's like us going to the bike factory and saying, okay, I want those handlebars, that seat, that frame, that suspension system, those wheels, that brake system, etc. It's like saying we're just taking something off the shelf that's already been made and using it. And that is one of the beautiful things about what we call scikit-learn. It's a part of SciPy, scientific Python, which is built on numerical Python, which all of these things are huge. And then just so you know, pandas is built on top of NumPy or numerical Python. And we're 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 just using these tools. Now, I want to caution, it's still important to know the concepts and the mathematical fundamentals. But what I'm trying to show someone is by starting with that recipe notebook, you can get a good start in just beginning to understand the machine learning development pipeline, understand the steps. I want to caution everyone listening, in this notebook we're referring to, if you've looked at it, we actually go backwards. We start with perfect data and we say, well, what would have been the next least perfect data? Then the next, in other words, we went backwards from modeling. Why do we do that? Because a big part of cleaning data includes modeling. A big part of reducing the feature set includes modeling techniques. So modeling is actually used throughout the pipeline to get to the best data set even. But I know I'm monologuing here, and forgive me for that. I just wanted to really emphasize that a lot of the confusion when you're looking at even that very simple code is getting used to the language it's in. You could have felt the same way if I had done it in R or Julia or, God forbid, again, C++. And I'm not knocking C++. I started out with C before Python was even around, and even Fortran before C was around. So, I've grown used to importing things, reusing things, but just understand it's okay to feel overwhelmed with the syntax. You'll get over it.
Perfect. Thank you. It seems like we have quite a few questions in the chat here.
Which
If
one
we
do you want me
want
to pull
to,
up?
let's see. Um, so let's start with Deepak's question.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Deepak was saying, I've recently started a job as a Tableau developer. I'd like to know if it would be a good option for him to move directly into machine learning, or if there's any other prerequisites that he should consider working on.
This is a great question. We could probably have a whole show just on this question, John David. So I'm on the integrated mlai.com blog site. There's a post I wrote called, it's roughly Mastering Your Own Data Science Learning Plan. And I encourage anyone that's wanting to branch into the deep arts of data science to formulate their own plan. Now, I want to promise you something. Your first plan is going to stink. It's probably going to stink bad, and that's okay. Everyone's first plan stinks. As you learn more, you'll refine it and revisit it frequently. When you get to your 20th revision, it's going to start looking really good. But again, start with the basics. Really understand linear regression and everything that you can do, all the accessories you can slap onto it. Once you've mastered linear regression, it's a short step to logistic regression. And once you master those two, now you've gotten some skill. Now, think of it this way, though. Do I know how to use it in Python? Well, you can start with my notebook for that and really try to understand, play with each step. What goes wrong if I change something, et cetera, et cetera. But then say, now, how do you derive the math that goes with linear regression? That's an art in itself. It might be something that takes you anywhere from an evening to 3 months, depending on who and where you are in life. But please remember, it took centuries to develop this math. I mean, literally centuries. So if it takes you 3 months, don't judge yourself. Be kind and gentle to yourself and get through it. And then what you'll find is over time, as you get through, don't make your learning plan just linear. What have I learned? Make it, linear regression. How deep have I gone? I've used it in Python. I've used it in R, if you want to do both. I've derived the math. I've coded it from scratch without using the libraries, et cetera, et cetera. Then you can do that for each thing you want to master. If you focus on concepts, though, as you keep doing these two-dimensional learning steps, if you focus on concepts, you'll learn faster and better over time.
So, Tom, I've got kind of a follow-up question for this. What are the dimensions in which you can kind of lay out your learning plan? So what I'm thinking about doing on my own learning platform is almost having like how they have like the Myers-Briggs personality test, and you can use that to kind of inform like what a good career path for you might be. I'm thinking about doing kind of like a questionnaire that it's in the analytics space, and on one end of the spectrum is data scientists, so like very coding heavy, very math oriented, and on the other end is you're more of a business analyst, and it's less math involved. You're probably going to be using like a graphical like a GUI like Power BI or Tableau, but the most important thing over on this side of the spectrum is that you understand how data applies to business. Are there dimensions? So basically, like the spectrum that I'm laid out is like the business analytics side has a 0 out of 10 in terms of technical acumen. A data scientist needs a 10 out of 10 in technical acumen, but business isn't as important because you're kind of deep in the weeds with data. Are there dimensions in which you can kind of lay out an ideal learning path based on different kind of, I think it's interesting, like especially the two students that I have on the call here. Hunter, I think you're more interested in the business side of things and the consulting, and less so on, like, you may want to learn a little sprinkling of Python so that you can do some predictive modeling. But Christina, based on our conversation earlier today, I think you want to lean on that math degree and get deeper into data science and maybe even machine learning or artificial intelligence. So those are completely different career trajectories and different learning paths.
I think I'm going to try to be very brief because I want to hear from Christina and Hunter on this. Again, as you can be open to keeping your learning plan a living learning plan. You're constantly revising, adding to it, but learn to group and tree things. For example, I've hinted at start with linear regression, then go to logistic regression. You can still use all the features there. You go to neural networks, to different types of neural networks, to convolutional neural networks, to encoders, to transformers. I mean, it's going to keep going. Then there's, once you've mastered that branch, there's the whole other branch of decision trees, random forest, et cetera. So your learning is ongoing, but that doesn't mean you can't fill out those two branches by just learning to use the tools without perfectly understanding how to derive everything from scratch right away. No, understand the mathematical concepts, but do you need to be able to derive the math from scratch and code it from scratch to make good use of it? No, that's like this very fine, detailed, expert, deep level. But if you keep trying to master concepts, you can go deeply. Now, one other dimension, though, or multiple other dimensions, John David, you and I think we were always agreeing on how much business acumen business analysts and data scientists should have. I realized after thinking deeply about it, we both agree that, hey, you need business acumen, but don't count on trying to tell the business stakeholders what they should be doing. Inform them with data. Yes, get up to speed with business acumen. My big beef is you want a data scientist with good communication skills. The
lingo, the business lingo.
And so when I come into a new domain with my analytical skills, I need to come up to speed with the lingo and talk with the business stakeholders and domain experts, but don't make that the litmus test for whether you're going to look at someone or not. You may make it the litmus test for, oh boy, Tom and John's analytical skills are equal, but John has had more domain experience in our domain. We're going to hire John over Tom. I get that. I understand that.
Right. So, Christina, I'm kind of curious. Do you have any further questions? So, I mean, and actually, am I mischaracterizing? Are you curious about, like, what would be your ideal job from your vantage point right now?
Well, I think I definitely am interested in the more like technical side. I think that is, sorry, my dog's like trying to get on my lap.
I think we need to get the dog in the shot. I don't know what the dog's doing down there, but anyway, sorry.
He wants to make an appearance. But yeah, so I'm definitely interested in learning more about like the technical aspect of it. But like you both mentioned, I think having that like business analytics background will like makes me interested also in the business aspect of it, which I think that if I do get into a more technical role that involves more of like, deep learning and machine learning, I think having that, at least surface level business acumen will definitely be helpful. And I think that's like what started my interest in the entire, data science space was that business analytics side of it. So I think, like Tom said, like you don't have to start from the very like bottom of you have to first learn every mathematical aspect of it. Like it is okay to start from the very like broad business side of it and then, trickle down into the more specific parts. Yeah.
And so that's what I'm doing right now.
So what would be your ideal job title if you could pick one out of a hat right now?
I guess just data scientist, which I understand that's like a very, very broad title. Like it falls into like a really big umbrella of different things. Sorry, my dog's drinking water again. It's probably super annoying.
Well, so I guess what I'm thinking of is like, I'm wondering if we like getting back to that. I love that concept of a learning path, but so maybe it's like you could have like, okay, she wants to be a data scientist that works in the marketing space. So understanding marketing attribution and building a predictive model that predicts, okay, well, here's a return on investment for these 5 different ads. Here are the factors that are affecting that. And then building a model around, all right, we need to kill these 3 ads and invest in these 2. So I think that I think that's where a lot of people are there's a missing link there between doing the heavy lifting and then having a return on investment from a business side.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that, I mean, like you've mentioned before, like if you are somebody that's interested in marketing, but you're also interested in like, data science and analytics, like that, you can definitely, blend those things and not have to do like necessarily all of the hard coding, but still have that like analytics skill set that will like push you forward in the marketing space.
Well, it's also your brand stack, like your personal brand stack. Like I know about marketing, I know about machine learning, or I know about linear regression, and I think that'll focus your job search. Thom, do you kind of see where I'm getting at? Is this like a top down? I feel like you're approaching it from like a bottom up, and I'm looking at it from a top down perspective.
And I'm a Tony Stark fan. Is it too much to ask for both? I love this, and I love the way Christina's summarizing. And Christina, maybe machine learning engineer starting out too. That's a good initial role.
Can you explain that role a little bit more?
Sure. It's very closely related to data science, but it's just focused more on the machine learning type stuff and the pipeline to develop predictive models. But you notice I'm a big fan of, we don't always need a predictive model. That work that we do to get to a predictive model, that's 80% of the value we can give back. And summarizing too, John David, I just want to say your learning plan should include multiple branches of things, not just various modeling techniques, but also coding. Maybe you add a new language every once in a while, maybe a new querying language, like instead of just SQL or SQL Server, maybe it's Postgres now, maybe it's MySQL, maybe it's, help me, the NoSQL one that's MongoDB. There's such a burden on a data scientist to know all these possible things. That's why you got to triage your plan. But I'm sorry, I keep not focusing this. This major important thing is, please include soft skill development, interview skills, constantly refine your resume, learn better. Buy Gilbert Achillaboone's book, People Skills for Analytical Thinkers. Things like this that you and I both love, John David. People have probably seen you and I spar. We're really just saying the same things, but getting aligned in the way we say it. And so I just want to encourage everyone to be well-rounded. Like if you're always focused on modeling techniques, but you're never really getting better at pandas and how to clean data, that's going to hurt you.
Oh, this is an interesting segue into the conversation me and Christina had earlier. So she has to pick a capstone project within her program. And immediately I was like, hey, if you need any data, I can totally donate data from my learning platform. And she was like, I'll tell you, what's your idea or your initial idea for your capstone project?
So our group we're all very interested in like women's health, especially because recently it's come out about how there's a lack of data on like women when it comes to the, health space. So we wanted to, do something that was geared towards like, okay, what can we do to help with the fact that there's like there's missing analysis on how, there's different effects for women compared to like men when it comes to like different things. Like I think the latest development was how the COVID-19 vaccine women differently, and it wasn't looked into during the clinical trials beyond pregnancy. But there's like missing data, like there's not a lot of it. And so because of that, there hasn't been a lot of analysis done on it. So we want to do something geared towards that.
Right. And we kind of had a debate around, or not a debate, but it was more just a conversation around, well, what kind of projects should you include within your portfolio? And I think that instead of working with just I don't want to say bland business data, because I mean, I think my data is fascinating, obviously, but her data, the data on women, it's an issue that she cares about. And it's like, you're using your skill set to impact the world in a way that you care about, which like that not only shows your technical acumen, but it also is an opportunity for you to weave a narrative that you can tell in an interview process. So I think that is a excellent personal branding point. And I think my advice would be, Christina, go with your gut of, we want to focus on women's health issues as opposed to, just working with business data.
Right. And I think I remember quite well from like the cohort with the business analytics minor, that you constantly emphasize about how, we should use data to tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you're personally invested in the data that you're analyzing, I think that narrative comes easier to you. Like you can tell that narrative with more passion. And then like if you are in an interview setting or with some sort of like stakeholder or something, if they can like sense that passion that you have for whatever analysis you're doing, I think it does kind of change the way that they look at it as well. So
Absolutely. Tom, what are your thoughts? Oh, you're muted.
I wanted to state that it's all about data storytelling. The predictions are part of a bigger story. I'm just trying to very frequently and maybe like a beating a dead horse spirit of, it's all about data storytelling, especially all the stuff upstream of the predictive model that you chose. If Dennis were here today, he'd say, yes, Tom, preach it. It's all about explainable AI. At first, when explainable AI came on the scene, my dear brother and I, Guy Sankari, were like, what, you're demanding us to explain these models that really are doing very complicated things you can't understand anyway? No, that's not the spirit of it. If we really take the time to understand why the model is doing what it's doing, it's improving our own intuition. It's not AIs that make the decisions. We create them and they help us make decisions. Well, if the process can help you be more informed about why the model's predicting what it's predicting, isn't that helpful to every aspect of what we're doing in our data storytelling? Absolutely.
Gotcha. All right.
We do have a couple questions in the chat still, by the way.
Okay, yeah. I was going to say, we've got our Discord server, but I want to make sure that Christina, since Christina's on, I want to make sure she gets all of her questions answered, because this is like a very timely. I mean, she just had her lecture on machine learning, and Christina, you're in like what, week 3 of the program?
So yeah, about to enter week. Yeah, this Saturday will be the 3rd.
Nice, awesome. But yeah, Hunter, tell me which one you want me to pull up.
Cheyenne wanted to ask about Scala. Scala, you ever heard of Scala? Or Scala? I don't know how you pronounce it.
So I see some enterprises and startups using Scala for their data science workflow. Is Scala a more powerful tool than Python in production?
If it's okay, that is a great question. But Cheyenne, I think you'd be better served by just doing a Google search and reading at least 5 references. And after you do that, you'll get a better answer than I could possibly throw out in a minute or two. But again, this comes back to that data science learning plan, Cheyenne. What you want to do is have a spirit of triaging that. There are going to be times where, I'll give you an example. I was learning reinforced learning, very hard, and yet not. It just messes with your head, as one of my gurus that I learned it from told me. And I got to a really good point with it, and then I had to abandon it for a while to go learn transformers because it might help with my job. There's so much to learn out there. You have to triage it based on the kind of roles you want or the kind of role you're currently in. And then and there's times where you have to re-triage or reprioritize elements in your learning plan based on what you're doing or want to do. I hope that helps, Cheyenne.
And it seems like you somewhat addressed Kadesha's question as well, who asked, can't one incorporate multiple forms of analysis, so descriptive, predictive, prescriptive, into business intelligence? It seems like you would say absolutely, that you would want to gather as much knowledge as possible and become more well-rounded.
I will tell you this, and I think it's germane to what we're talking about. John David, I'm really curious if you've come across this too. Beverly Wright had me involved as a judge in a competition for people doing data science work at the undergrad level.
Mhm.
And we continually had this one issue with this one brilliant young judge who was enamored with this one group because they did all the domain experts speak really well. But they weren't backing up their conclusions with predictive analytics or data science. And we had to keep pointing this out multiple times to where the whole judge panel, they were about to vote for this team that had clearly not done the data science work, the machine learning pipeline. And everyone, once they realized this and saw the evidence for it, switched to another team that was coming up with counterintuitive results based on real analysis. And this is the thing we have to watch out for. A lot of times, you see this in A/B testing too. A good designer that's done A/B testing for years, they'll say, my design choices are wrong 90% of the time. But thank God data's there to inform me about what really makes a difference on our click-throughs, on our website. Now, if a design expert's saying that, he's a domain expert in design, but he's finding, based on the data, I'm wrong 90% of the time. We really just care about making more money here at our .com company.
Yeah.
Be very careful. You have to encourage people, especially get with your domain experts before you give a big formal expert. Informally, meet with your domain experts and say, I want you to be aware I'm coming up with this counterintuitive prediction. And then that's when the explainable AI can make a real difference. But I hope, I thought to say that because of Kadesha's question. I hope that
Yeah.
experience helped.
Yeah, well, to your point about like, I see this all the time in the entrepreneurship space. Like, people they start a business and it makes them feel good, but they have not thought about it beyond their own ego investment. Like they think it's a really good idea, and then they go and they put it out in the market and no one buys it. And then they think, oh, well, people are just idiots or they're dumb or they just don't get it. But when really it's like, no, you need to humble yourself. And that's something that, I mean, you get to see me go through this in real time where like I thought, oh man, working with real data and building out these portfolios on Tableau is just a huge winner. And then we tested out $2,000 worth of ads, got 0 sales from that over the last 3 months. So something is off about that product market fit, even though I feel like it's a fantastic product. Yeah, and I think that's something that that mentality, you can only earn that through basic like failure. I mean, that's why I think, what's the motto in Silicon Valley? Fail quickly. Like you want to quickly get to market and see if it's a good idea and then iterate as you go. To where I mean, I've seen people who are entrepreneurs who work on this idea like in their basement for 4 years and then they put it out and it's a dud. To where like if you would have done like a very quick mock-up prototype and tested it out, you can then, I mean, this is where data, like psychographic data, comes into play. You can get direct feedback and say, oh, I like this feature, I didn't like that. But yeah, I see that as kind of the business acumen side of things. I don't know if that applies to machine learning as much as understanding kind of how business markets work.
You know, I was listening to this. You would have loved this video, guys. It's on YouTube. It was on A/B testing. A guy from Groupon in Amsterdam, and he was hilarious. He was saying, you know, it's really humbling doing A/B testing as a designer because I find I'm wrong 90% of the time, but then I really enjoy it because I can go in to the CEO and tell him, he's wrong at least 90% of the time. And so are my friends at the company. But that's why they do the A/B testing. And it really drives home a big element of what data scientists want to get good at, which is hypothesis testing. Just even forming an accurately stated hypothesis test for A/B to say, is this, I've got this current situation, I want to propose this alternate one. The null hypothesis is that this new thing I'm proposing won't make any difference. The alternative hypothesis is that it will make a difference. It'll get more click-throughs, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But again, 90% of these things, they're doing it on little tests like the color of a button. I mean, it gets down to that level of testing. And so they take a sampling that's stochastically significant from their huge user base and they test it. And they almost always count on the null hypothesis is going to be right most of the time. And when they get a huge result, like Microsoft did with Bing, when they added the little descriptions under each title in the title script, that had a huge impact. So huge, they were like, no, something's wrong with the way we set up the test. They went through all of that with a fine-tooth comb and went, oh no, this was really a super gigantic, huge difference. But that's how you do those A/B tests, to find the gold in the pan. After you've panned for thousands of times and you finally find, I found a vein of gold here. I need to keep panning here and go into the mountain, etc.
Gotcha. All right. Christina, do you have any other? So let's ask a few more questions of Hunter and Christina, and then we can hop over to Discord. And then if we have time, we can get back to the YouTube live chats. So you guys have any other questions for Thom here?
I don't currently. I think one of the questions I saw on the Discord server was something that I was also curious about. So I don't know if there's a way to like pull that up, but it was like.
Sure. So I think someone posted a comment and then deleted it. I don't know why they did that. But here, let me pull this up right now. All right, so I'm going to maximize it so we can see this. All right, which one was it, Christina?
The Sanchez, the analyst.
Okay.
So the best tips for quality control and iterative performance analysis.
Oh, that's we just touched on the iterative approach to problem solving. It's perfect.
Oh.
Actually, this is a great question, and it's a simple answer too. Remember, we're almost always using samples, hopefully as large as possible, of the full amount of data available. And again, the larger the sample, the better. But many things can happen with that data over time. So you need a constant human overwatch of saying, we're trying to predict this variable ahead of time, but then of course we want to find out, well, what were the actual values? And so that we can see, is the model still doing good that is in production? And then we also want to track what the distribution, the sampling distribution looks like, so we can see, hey, is our central limit, is our sampling distribution still in flux? Is it moving around? Have we zoned in on a very good statistics, not just the mean, but other statistics that can be sampled reliably? And then, but once you see that, yeah, we've reached a stability, does that mean that you don't have to monitor that machine learning model in production? Absolutely not. There could be still more data drift due to changes in policy somewhere. That change in policy could have caused a concept drift, which means we need to add a new feature to the model or take one away. So it's a constant monitoring of what's in production. The current model in production may not be the best model in production for all time. It could be that you need to go to another model. And by the way, there's no free lunch. You can't know ahead of time which model is going to do the best. You can have a guess, but you should be trying multiple models every time and comparing them. I hope that helped.
Yeah, no, I think that was fantastic. All right. So Kadisha asks, I saw a post on LinkedIn about how a small portion of dashboards are actually utilized in businesses. I think I agree with that premise. I think that a lot of analytics work unfortunately goes unused. I wanted to know if more analysts / data professionals should learn how to create data-driven apps / dashboards with tools such as R Shiny and Python. Would these apps provide better value than Tableau or Power BI, especially when showcasing insights gained from machine learning?
When you consider what we just went through with a designer doing an A/B test real time on the web with different instances of their website, all you could do is test to say, well, I've been doing my dashboards in Tableau or Power BI. What would be the difference if I made them in R Shiny and Python? And there's so many things you could measure there. The first time you do it in R Shiny or Python Dash, it's going to take longer because you're learning a new tool. Mm-hmm. But the nice thing is your automation might, I'm not saying definitely will, might become better in the long run. Your ability to release new dashboards might speed up with those other tools. But Tableau and Power BI are popular for a reason. They're easy to use. They're easy to come up to speed with. You can even automate all the things we're talking about. The nice thing about being able to do what we're talking about dashboard-wise in R or Python is, again, the ability to automate more or to specialize what you're doing. You would just have to test it, is what I'm saying.
All right. So my take on this question is that this isn't a platform issue. It's not, well, is Python going to be a better platform to visualize data than Tableau? I think that the issue is kind of upstream from that, in that most analysts are not good at selling their their stakeholders on using data to drive their decision, or they're not good at making usable dashboards that speak the language that the executive thinks in. So, for example, the example I always go to is when I'm designing a dashboard for a chief marketing officer, it's usually much more colorful and more visualization heavy than when I'm designing a visualization for a chief financial officer. Chief financial officers typically want to see very boring tables, and they want to be able to slice and dice through that. And a lot of times they even just want to pull the data out of Power BI or Tableau and into Excel, because that's what they've been using for the past 30 years. So they're essentially using the dashboard to slice through the data to get this data set that they want. So I think this is more of a question of how well can you influence versus how well does the platform you're using to visualize data effectively do that.
I think it also depends a lot on the actual job. Like what are you expected? What is expected of you in whatever you're doing, whether it's a project or a position at a company. Are you expected to give that more in-depth look that R Shiny or Python might provide you? Whereas, what are you trying to actually gain out of it? I think is an important question to ask, and so no, I don't think there is necessarily a right or wrong answer to this question.
Hunter, I love what you just said, and it occurred to me. I want everyone in the audience to really think about this. Let's say you're in a shop or a workspace and you're making something. You focus on what you're trying to do, and then you grab the tools that you need to figure out how to do it. That's really what all this comes down to. Now, start with the tool you're most familiar with and do the best job you can. But over time, try new tools. And this would be strongly backed up by the brilliant authors of The Pragmatic Programmer, Dave and Andy. They're constantly encourage people, hey, every once in a while, go try a new integrated development environment or a new programming language. And I think we can adapt that philosophy as data scientists and business analysts too.
Gotcha. All right, so let's move on to this last Discord question by the username Logarithm. I did some more research on machine learning. I'm curious on how data scientists collect good test data that doesn't present bias or wrong results when the program is deployed in the real world.
That's just steeped in, and Christina, back me up, but that's just steeped in really knowing statistics well. It depends on the type of study or experiment you're doing. There's rules we follow about sizes of the data. So you want to get in and do all of that correctly, and neighbor with your fellow data scientists or domain experts or statisticians, just as a review to say, hey, I'm going to do this study. I'm making sure my data is going to be good and balanced and unbiased. It's random. If you know it's a binomial study, you've got those 4 conditions. If you know it's a sampling study, you've got those 3 common conditions. And where do I go when I need to review statistics? I wish I could call him my buddy because I appreciate him so much. The best teacher in our country by far, Saul Khan. I go to Khan Academy. You can learn almost everything from Khan Academy. And when you can't learn it there, you can go to YouTube. It's
That's
amazing. True. It's just amazing how giving the community is to one another. And I hope people that are creating great material are making great money doing that. But seriously, you just want to be really good at knowing what type of statistics you're doing related to your machine learning and collect the data appropriately according to those rules.
Gotcha. Hunter,
I'm curious what Christina would say to that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with, having that statistical background. Prior to getting, into the data science space, I was looking into the actuarial analysis space, and I think you realize how many rules there are when it comes to collecting the data for the type of analysis, for example, an actuary would do, which involves a lot of predictive analysis, because you're predicting lots of different factors. But if you're doing life insurance, probabilities of when somebody's going to die, or the how likely they are to suffer from certain diseases and those types of things. And I remember looking into that. There were so many rules when it came to probability and statistics. So yeah, I definitely agree that trying to get some knowledge of those statistical rules when it comes to collecting the data and what is considered a good data set to pull an analysis from is really important.
I agree. I think that as I'm moving more into the field, I'm realizing just how much that math weighs in no matter what you're doing. Really, you have to have that foundation, that basic foundation of statistics to really tie in the business acumen with the data quality, that there might be data quality issues, and when you're cleaning the data or whatnot, and a lot of that depends on, like you said, Christina, what is a good data point in this data set. Well, you have to calculate that realistically. You're going to have to find the control limits, or whatever it might be, and that's been my experience as well. Even though I can't say that I'm not a math major, so I'm not as well versed as you might be. But
and real quick, John David, let me know. I'm pretty sure you agree wholeheartedly with this. Audience, friends, and family, if you're in business analytics, data science, machine learning, whatever, if you don't love continual learning, we love you, but you're in the wrong field. If you don't want to keep mastering that next skill, or reviewing that thing you haven't used in a while, or learning this new technique or this new tool, you're probably in the wrong field. We don't judge you for it. We'd like to save you time. Just go somewhere else, because you will not like this. You won't be happy. But if you love being a geek, and I mean geek in a positive way, if you love being analytical and playing with data and the power of decision that it helps with, you're in the right place.
Yeah, me and Christina were talking at the office earlier about it's almost like a compulsion of like I have to be learning something. If I'm not learning something, I'm starting to get jittery and anxious and like what it's almost like I'm missing something. Like there's this void created there. But I mean, I geek out more on the business side of things. Like I don't know another professor who was in an effort to teach business launched their own startup to use that data to study business. Like, I mean, that's I geeked out on. I bootstrapped that platform over the summer, and then that's the only thing I did, and it was, I mean, it was challenging, but it was a labor of love. Like I poured a lot into it, but I mean, there's just so many things that I was absolutely dead wrong about. Like the marketing is just like the top of the like the most obvious thing, but you know, like I'm collecting all this customer psychographic data, and they're saying, like, for example, one of my students is an accountant, and he's taking my marketing course, and he was like, he gave it a 4 out of 10 in terms of effectiveness and how I'm communicating, which I'm realizing that, okay, well, maybe this course isn't designed for accountants, so getting grilled in the reviews from someone who's not the target demographic is okay. But just seeing how the different minds work is it's fascinating to me. And I'm not going to geek out like you guys are on like coding or machine learning, but it is kind of I think it's application based learning. I think that is the most effective way to kind of grow within this career. Tom, do you agree with that?
I do, and I want to encourage you, John David. When I was teaching at the university level, and I had an amazing mentor named Walter Bradley, who was my department head at the time, and I got my first student evals, and I read them, and I was just crestfallen seeing some of the negative comments. And then I went in, and he said, "Tom, great job. This is amazing." And I went, "But Walter, what about this?" "Tom, you're always going to get those. Don't even worry about that. Look at these. Look at the distribution." He took me to the data, and he said, "Look at you're doing great. You're always going to have someone that didn't like you." And I went, "Oh, wow, that's such a relief to hear that." But it's amazing. Even the best videos I see on YouTube have a certain number of thumbs down.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are people thinking? So don't sweat that.
I feel like I know why Hunter's laughing.
So a lot of people know on the channel that I started out with John David and his class at High Point University. And there was an individual in this class who was less than engaged, I'll say. And
grilled me.
yeah, grilled.
He didn't teach
grilled
me
John
anything.
David
He was the worst
daily.
professor I've ever had.
And after the fact, left a terrible review, as if it's like, oh, it's his fault that you were like the worst student ever. I don't understand that one, but that's when you were retelling that story. That's just what I was going through my head at the time.
Yeah. Dealing with the public is brutal. So there's just a certain percentage of people who are rather out there. I'm being very euphemistic.
I'm going to be very confessional for a moment. So I hit a milestone, over 30,000 followers on LinkedIn.
Congratulations.
And it basically helped during our last show, John David. I think it happened very close to that point. And Greg Caquillo is a dear friend. He's like a brother. He's coached me on things he's learned. And really, it's now more about the number of people I can help, because I really dig that. I love that. My family encourages me on to keep, finding ways to help more people in a practical way. But the other night, my wife came in, "You want to go out to dinner?" I went, "Yes." I felt so beat up, but part of it was because I knew how petty I was being about being looked over by certain groups and certain things. I went, "Tom, you baby brat idiot." Self-indulged. I was so down on myself, but still bugged by this petty thing. I just had to keep praying until I got over it and thought, "Man, Lord, help me to never do that again." And I said, I think I know in a very small way how movie stars must feel. But I felt so petty and immature for the way I was feeling inside. And I think I'm over it now, because my integrated family is just such a gargantuan blessing in my life. And they have helped me grow, I think, more than I've helped them grow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think also too, it is part of like human nature to overvalue or over fixate on negative things than on the positive. Because I mean, historically speaking, if you didn't focus on the tiger that was, on the edge of your village, it's going to kill you. I mean, I think there's a reason why we were focusing on the negative things. But I mean, now we're in this like weird social media age where there's constantly, I mean, they're threats, but it's like threat to your ego, not to your livelihood.
Exactly. And now we can circle this back to data. There's going to be those times where you present a killer dashboard or a killer machine learning development predictive model with all the stories behind that too, and someone's not going to accept it.
Well,
Find
actually,
out
I did
how can I get that? How can I do better next cycle? It's not always on us that it doesn't get accepted. Sometimes there's just a little different. Like this was a huge learning for me. I had this very hard modeling task, and the architect of our group, I decided I didn't want to go back into the room again and get shot down by a lot of questions motivated by ego when they really didn't have a good reason for asking that question. So I did this unknowingly. I just said, okay, Doug, here's what I'm doing and why. And he'd argue with me and I would just, defend and most like 80% or more of the time he'd say, oh, now I see why you're going. Yeah, I agree. Keep going. And then I probably 5 times when we went into that final meeting where I presented my findings, he shot down every question for me. He answered every question for me. That's why I'm a big fan of develop crap and show it to your architect or his key stakeholders so that when you go in that final formal meeting, they're all there to defend you, not to ask you the hard. Don't work in a silo. I'm horrible that way, just like you described.
All right. So, Sri Devi, I don't want to answer the full question here because I think part of what he says relates back. So I have 2 interviews lined up. I'm taking an applied machine learning course this semester, but I'm not confident about my coding skills. So I think that this is what I wanted to like really root down on is, do you have any tips or advice on how people can build confidence within the data science, the data professional space?
So Sri Devi, I feel your pain. By the way, Dr. Thom Ives, PhD, huge career, a lot of analytics. I could be interviewed by any 21-year-old on the planet in a technical interview and be brought to my knees in humility. Anyone can fail anyone on a technical interview. I have kind of tried to, and I learned a lot of this from Andrew Jones, and I think his name is Jeff Seif. He's a great guy on YouTube. Look, have a spirit of every interview is a learning experience. Go in there, don't even count on, don't worry about whether you're going to get the job or not. Worry about if you're going to learn how to interview better. Because every interview is a crapshoot. You could have the best set of interviews of your life and someone just edged you out based on a difference in experience. You could have the worst interviews of your life seemingly to you, and you got the offer. So I say treat interviews like learning experiences, not like I got to get this job. If you do that, it'll just make you do worse in the interview. Be as relaxed and confident, and don't be afraid to say, I don't know, but this is how I would go about learning it. And then take what you learn from these interviews, Sri Devi, and get better. Just get better.
Right. And I wanted to add too, the way my understanding of how to build confidence, which I could probably lose some confidence and be in a better standing, is through demonstrated performance. So and I think that I also wanted to loop back to this question because confidence is not only an internal thing, but you need to have other people build confidence in you. And that's exactly what you did with your stakeholder. You did it through demonstrated performance. So you repeatedly showed up, you were consistent, and you built the model and showed them along the way. And I think that that's a huge factor that a lot of people don't really think about is how can I influence and gain favor and confidence to people high up in the organization, because that is really going to be huge for your career trajectory.
You're absolutely right. What you're saying applies in the job, but I'm feeling Sridevi's pain in the interview. And, having to demonstrate math that you haven't reviewed in a while and you didn't know that question was going to come up, or, oh, this corner code case that's a legitimate question, but I'm stumbling through the answer. It is so humbling, and it can happen to anyone. That's why I really encourage Sridevi, don't judge yourself based on this one interviewer experience. Treat it as a learning step, just a learning step. I really appreciate, what's his name? Eric. He's a prolific poster on LinkedIn, encouraging the community, but he made it clear, I have hundreds of rejections for applications in my inbox. I have bombed several technical interviews. It's just, I wish I could remember his last name. He's really encouraging. But the spirit of, hey, don't judge yourself. Just keep going, keep learning, keep getting better at interviewing. It's humbling. Get used to rejection. We all feel it.
Yeah, that's true.
I think his question reminds me a lot of the video that Tina did on her about her FANG interview, and how she didn't feel comfortable or incredibly confident with her skills, and I believe it was maybe SQL, and she kind of like reversed that and was able to find like what kind of questions are they.
Christina, you got out.
What kind of question? I'm going to guess what kind of questions they were going to ask, and then focus in on that type of learning SQL. And I've done some posts related to this. I use SQL in sprints, and so I get up to speed with it again. I use it for a while. I encode it into Python, and then it's automated, and I'm not doing it manually. So now I got to go review. And I finally just created some mnemonics, and you figure out this is part of that learning plan. Since I use SQL sporadically, what can I do to remember it better? We keep learning by trial and error.
Practice makes perfect.
That's true.
It's the phrase that has existed for feels like a millennia at this point, but it's true. Going back and practicing old stuff. Nope.
I hope we've gone long enough. I actually need to get ready for something here at noon my time. It's 45 till then. But John David, I just want to tell the community, follow this guy. He's awesome. He's really doing great things for the community. I'm a big fan of yours, John David. I'm glad we're friends. I still remember my first exposure to you was interviewing Christina Stathopoulos, and I was just really impressed with how you put her on the spot. You didn't let it scare you, because she's very sweet, but I also think she's kind of intimidating in a very way.
Well, I think that if I'm going to put you on the spot, it's because I respect you and I know you can handle it. Just because I know you can. I'm not a 21-year-old.
I feel very respected by you.
That's exactly right. You're the most respected.
Oh, well, I'm not sure I've earned it, but I will take it.
Well, second to Hunter, because Hunter gets put on the spot all the time.
Yeah.
When I look at the history of math and science, I look at the most important person here today is Hunter and Christina. To me, the youngest family members in integrated machine learning and AI, to me, they're the kings. And I hope Hugo's listening. He's my beautiful, brilliant, amazingly altruistic son in Nigeria. He's just taking our family to new levels. But it's this next generation. I just want to keep lifting them up, because they're amazing and they're brave. I mean, the world's changing faster than ever, and you've got so much to learn, and yet they're unfazed by it. Well, I'm not saying they're unfazed, but they're courageous.
Unfazed is courageous. A strong word.
Yes.
Slightly phased.
I think everyone is at least slightly phased, all of us, because it's hard stuff we do. All right, guys.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tom. I know you got to go. Thank you, Hunter and Christina. This has been awesome. And everyone in the live chat. See you guys later.
Take care.